Hey guys, tonight we take a slow walk through sun-warmed streets into the dusty heart of ancient Athens, where something surprisingly peaceful is taking shape, not politics or theater or war, but pottery. You'll pass fig trees nodding lazily in the breeze, catch the scent of old olive oil seeping from market carts, and hear the distant clack of sandals on worn stone. Somewhere, a lyre is being tuned very badly. You are not going there. You're heading toward the quiet quarter, where the real drama involves clay that won't center on the wheel and slip that dries too fast. It's true, people in ancient Greece argued about democracy and wrestled in the nude, but they also spent full afternoons gently pressing their thumbs into damp terracotta. Some pots were purely functional, others were works of silent beauty. None of them would have existed without a lot of patient wedging, trimming, and squinting in the sun, and tonight we're going to join them. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're up for it, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You walk past crooked houses, some plastered, others left in exposed brick, and turn down a narrower road toward the Keramakos district, the Potter's Quarter. Your sandals kick up reddish dust as you go, and somewhere nearby, a dog gives a half-hearted bark before collapsing again in the shade. The further you go, the more the smells change. Olive trees give way to something earthier, clay, ash, damp linen, and the faintest hint of charcoal. There's no formal sign that you've entered the potter's zone, but you'll know it. Everything around you wears a powdery coat of red dust. Men and women shuffle past carrying jugs, some freshly glazed, some chipped from use. Children dart in and out of doorways, their hair speckled white from a morning of wedging clay into proper submission. You pause to watch one of them, barefoot, grinning, holding a lopsided bowl like it's a prize. Behind him, leaning in the doorway, is a tired-looking older woman, probably his mother, scratching at her elbow with a wooden tool still damp with slip. She doesn't wave, but her eyes flick to you, then down to the bowl, then back to you. The message is clear: we all start somewhere. You pass by communal wells and two old men playing a silent game involving broken pot shards and a stick. Neither of them looks up as you pass. One of them sneezes. Dust hangs in the air a beat too long before dispersing like smoke. It's a neighborhood always on the verge of settling, quiet. Not because nothing happens, but because everything happens slowly. A cart squeaks past, pulled by a donkey that looks older than democracy. Its cargo dozens of pots, some stacked, others cushioned in straw, all swaying with every bump in the road. No one seems alarmed. If one breaks, another will be made. That's the thing about ancient Greek pottery. There's a lot of it. Not because they made indestructible art, though some came close, but because they made it constantly. Amphorae for olive oil, kylixes for wine, craters for mixing water and alcohol in that very Greek attempt to appear sober at parties. And when one cracked or chipped, it wasn't a crisis. It was Tuesday. You reach a long, low building with a sagging cloth draped across its entrance. There's no name carved into the lintel, just a row of amphorae sitting in the dust, their bases red with soil, their mouths open like they're waiting for rain. You lift the cloth and step inside. Cool air wraps around you, thick with the smell of damp clay and burnt straw. Shadows cling to every surface. A single shaft of light cuts through the roof, illuminating a wheel in the center of the room. It spins slowly, unattended, as if just finished or just beginning. A young man glances up from a nearby bench, where he's trimming the foot of a kylix with a sharp wooden tool. His eyes flick back down to his work. He's in no hurry. Nobody here is. The hum of scraping, the gentle splash of water, the occasional grunt of effort. This is the soundscape of the potter's world. There are no shouted orders, no crashing tools, no sense of urgency, just clay, hands, and time. You move carefully through the space, past shelves stacked with bowls in various states of becoming. Some are wet and glossy, others matte and firm. A few have cracked during drying. No one seems upset. Mistakes aren't disasters here, they're reminders. In a corner, a much older man is coaxing a lump of clay into a jar's base. His fingers are gnarled, wrists stiff, still. The wheel moves under his control like it owes him a favor. This is a master potter, not because he lectures or boasts, but because everything he does is quiet, minimal, and effective. Historians still argue whether these artisan workshops operated like family businesses or were more guild-like, with hired help and apprentices rotating in and out. What's clear is that knowledge passed down here wasn't just technical, it was tactile, sensory, absorbed through repetition and failure. You glance around and realize this is more than a workspace. It's a library of gestures, where every pot is a sentence, every fingerprint a footnote, and unlike scrolls, pots lasted, even the broken ones. Archaeologists today have reconstructed entire Athenian shipping routes based on the clay fragments they've found in distant ports. But here and now, nobody's thinking about posterity. They're thinking about lunch, and whether this batch of slip is too thick, and whether the kiln will cool properly before nightfall. You sit down beside a drying rack and watch the light shift across rows of half-finished vases. Somewhere nearby, someone laughs softly at something that's already forgotten, and so you stay, content in the quiet, breathing in the dust of thousands of forgotten afternoons, just like this one. You duck a little as you move deeper into the workshop, careful not to bump your head on the low beams overhead. They're hung with bundles of dried reeds, spare wheel cords, and one very confused-looking chicken. It clucks once and then settles back into silence, clearly used to the comings and goings of potters and their apprentices. To your left, you spot a simple brazier heating a metal scoop of water, kept warm for softening stubborn clay. It emits the faintest whisper of steam, fogging up a nearby glassy shard pinned to the wall like a makeshift mirror. This isn't a glamorous space. It's dusty, practical, worn down by years of hands that didn't care about decor. And yet, there's something comforting about that. A rhythm that's older than coins, older than most gods, older than the idea of Greek itself. Ahead of you, a master potter sits cross-legged on a woven mat, motionless but for the slow push of his heel against the flywheel of the potter's wheel. Each push sets the slab spinning lazily, wobbling a little as if also reluctant to work today. He gestures for you to sit. You do. The pot he's forming isn't large, perhaps a simple arabalos for scented oil, but the care with which he shapes its neck could rival that of an artist painting a myth onto a palace wall. He doesn't speak, and neither do you, not out of reverence, but because here, silence is part of the process. The walls are lined with jugs and bowls, some glossy from slip, others still chalky and gray. A few bear scenes scratched into their surfaces, dancers, fish, even a man holding what looks suspiciously like a turnip. Artistic license, perhaps, or someone just really proud of their root vegetables. Historians still debate whether these depictions were strictly ceremonial or simply decorative. Were they coded messages, status symbols, or was that horse on the side of the vase just someone's favorite neighbor's mule? The truth is, nobody fully agrees. But what is agreed upon is that this place, this humble, smoke-scented studio, is where some of the finest ceramics in the ancient world were born. A quiet scuffle draws your attention. An apprentice, not older than 15, struggles to carry a large lump of raw clay from a wheelbarrow to the center of the room. His knees buckle a little, but he grits his teeth and keeps going. The master potter raises an eyebrow, but says nothing. The boy reaches his destination, drops the clay with a soft thump, and then collapses cross-legged beside it, breathing hard. You're reminded that no one starts here already skilled. Everyone learns by pressing their hands into failures, and often, those failures get recycled. Clay that dries too quickly is soaked again. Pieces that crack can be ground into grog and added to the next batch. This isn't waste, it's reincarnation, one bowl into another. The potter beside you gestures again, this time toward a smaller wheel off to the side. It's hand-powered, no clever foot pedal here, just your palms and your patience. You walk over and squat beside it. The wooden seat creaks a little beneath you. A ball of centered clay awaits, already wedged and smoothed. You tentatively set your hands on it. It's cool to the touch, slightly sticky, and breathing with moisture, with a slow push. You start the wheel spinning, not perfectly round, but good enough. You press your thumbs gently down the center, feeling the clay resist, then yield. It wobbles. You adjust. It slumps. You laugh. Nobody watches. Nobody corrects. This is part of the process. In the corner, a different apprentice quietly sings a low tune in Doric, soft and tuneless, like a lullaby meant for no one. It blends with the hiss of the brazier, the scrape of trimming tools, and the occasional squawk from the chicken, who is now inexplicably nesting in a broken amphora. Your fingers keep shaping the clay, not into anything recognizable yet, more a lump with a dream, but the motion itself is hypnotic. There's something ancient about it. You imagine someone else, centuries ago, seated just like this, fighting the same wobble, squinting at the same drying cracks, and still, the work continued. You glance around again. The tools are basic: wood, bone, reed, but each has been worn to fit a particular hand. A trimming loop rests on a clay-smeared rag. A slip brush sits in a cracked cup that's probably older than the boy who used it. These aren't precision instruments. They're companions in quiet craft. A fringe detail most modern museum goers miss. Some potters sharpen their tools on their teeth. Yes, Really. Worn molars with grooves suggest they gripped slender reeds or styluses in their mouths while working. Not exactly OSHA compliant, but effective. The master potter moves past you now, inspecting the shelves. He lifts one bowl gently, taps its rim with a knuckle, and nods. It's dry enough for painting, but that's for later. For now, it just sits on its perch, waiting like everyone else. Time slows in the workshop. It's not just you, it's the air itself, thick with patience. Outside, the sun shifts slightly behind a roof tile, casting a stripe of gold across a line of half-finished lekythoi. You trace it with your eyes, like a sundial measuring the hours by drying clay. You pause, your bowl still unfinished, its rim uneven and lopsided. You feel a flicker of frustration. Then you remember the little boy outside, the one with the crooked pot and the proud smile. Maybe it doesn't have to be perfect. Maybe it just has to be made. And so, with dust on your knees and the wheel still spinning, you press your fingers in again. A muffled bray pulls your attention back toward the doorway. You step outside, squinting as your eyes adjust to the brightness. Across the yard, tethered to a fig tree that's seen better centuries, stands a donkey with a face that communicates one clear thing. It is completely done with everyone. Its ears twitch half-heartedly, more in habit than curiosity, and its legs are dusted with flakes of red soil. Someone hands you a rope, no explanation needed, and you follow the donkey's slow, resigned trudge down a well-worn path that curls behind the workshop. This is no scenic detour. This is where the real, raw material lives. You're going to the clay pit. The path descends slightly, curving between sun-bleached rocks and brittle shrubs. Eventually, the greenery gives way to a shallow trench with one shimmering purpose red attic clay. Its color is startling, a deep rust, like dried blood, offset by veins of paler silt. You squint. The surface glistens slightly, as if it remembers the rain. You give the donkey a pat. It doesn't care. Using a bent spade and more guesswork than skill, you begin scooping the top layers away. Beneath that crust lies a thicker, wetter layer, what the potters call the good stuff. It clings to your tool with a satisfying slurp. You lift a load into a waiting basket, then another, then stop when your back reminds you that you're not an Athenian laborer, nor are you paid like one. Historians still argue whether the clay pits were communal or privately owned. Some evidence suggests large families controlled access, while others point to state-regulated digs. What's certain is that without this precise blend of iron-rich earth and fine silt, attic pottery wouldn't have its famous black and red sheen. Once your basket is full and your shoulders less full of energy, you lead the donkey back. It does not increase its pace. It does not acknowledge your efforts. It knows this route too well, and it's not here for flattery. Back at the workshop, a few apprentices meet you at the door with practiced hands. They unload the basket, dumping the clay into a large, sunken vat lined with stone. Someone adds water from a bucket. The mixture is thick, soupy, and looks slightly like overcooked lentils. It's not glamorous, but it's essential. Here, the clay rests, not for minutes, but days. This soaking allows impurities to settle and textures to harmonize. Occasionally, someone will reach in with a long paddle and stir it gently. It's just to keep things friendly. You watch as a young boy lowers a sieve into the vat, and lifts it out slowly, letting the thinner particles slip through while catching larger bits, pebbles, roots, or the occasional fossilized something that absolutely should not be in your cup later. The filtered clay is scooped into a new trough to begin the next stage drying. Not entirely, just enough so it can be kneaded into shape without collapsing into sadness. It's spread flat and left under linen cloths, weighted with stones. This phase is a lot like baking bread. If your bread took 4 days and could survive 1,000 years, you're handed a glob of semi-dry clay. It's cool, soft, and very slightly springy. You roll it between your hands. It hums with potential. An older apprentice motions for you to join him under a shaded pergola. This is the wedging area where clay gets its mind right. He slams his lump onto a worn slab of stone, folds it over itself, presses, turns, slams again. You mimic him. There's a rhythm to it. Folds, press, turn, fold, press, and turn, like kneading dough, but with fewer delicious outcomes and more risk of elbow soreness. This process forces out air bubbles and aligns the clay's particles, making it less likely to betray you on the wheel. You're told that some masters can tell by touch alone when clay is ready. You, however, are told with a nod. In a nearby basket, you spot a pile of failed pots, collapsed, cracked, or just weirdly shaped. These aren't trash. They're future grog, pulverized and added back into the next batch of clay. Grog provides texture, strengthens the mix, and teaches the clay a little humility. There's something oddly comforting in this closed-loop system. Nothing really goes to waste. Every mistake gets a second shot. A soft breeze stirs the cloth overhead. The donkey snorts once, then settles. A blackbird pecks at a lump of discarded slip, then thinks better of it. You wedge until your arms ache slightly. Then you stop. No one rushes you. No one claps. That's not what this is about. Here, the reward is in the doing, not the praise. The clay doesn't care how inspired you are. It just wants your time before you head inside. You pause to watch the apprentices uphaul another load of raw clay to the vat. Someone hums a tune with no lyrics. Another slaps a fly away from their ankle with a reed. It's a slow ballet, dusty and deliberate, old as architecture, and in that moment, with dirt under your fingernails and the sun painting your shadow long against the walls, you realize something strange. This is peace, not the kind you chase, but the kind you settle into, like clay in a trough, waiting to become something useful. The air inside the workshop is thicker now, warmer, humid with the breath of clay and the faint sourness of slip left too long in the bowl. You return to the low bench beside the hand wheel. This time, you carry your own wedge of prepared clay, gently kneaded and resting in your palms, like something alive and slightly indecisive. It's heavier than you remember, or maybe your arms are just tired. You press it onto the center of the wheel. It wobbles. You press again, still wobbly. An apprentice across the room chuckles once, barely more than a puff of air through the nose, then returns to trimming a cup's foot ring with monk-like focus. You wet your hands from a cracked bowl nearby. The water is cool and slightly cloudy. It helps the clay glide, helps your hands glide too, and so you begin again, trying to remember how the master's thumbs moved, slow, strong, inward with intention. The wheel spins, A little lopsided, you steady it with your palms. This time, the clay doesn't fight back. You begin wedging it further, not by kneading now, but by pressing into the center with both thumbs, coaxing a hollow to open, then gently widening that hollow while pulling the clay's walls up. It's like shaping a breath. You exhale with it. It breathes with you. This part of pottery making, centered, quiet, hands wet and clay soft, is where the world narrows to two things: motion and material. Your thoughts thin, your muscles memorize, and somehow it's both absorbing and almost boring. The kind of boring that frees your brain to wander. No one talks. The wheel squeaks a little with every turn, like it's gently complaining but willing to work. Your vessel, though calling it that feels generous, is slowly forming low, thick-walled, vaguely bowl-shaped, maybe. You're not entirely sure yet. Pottery, you're beginning to learn, is less about having a vision and more about letting the clay tell you what it wants to be than pretending it was your idea all along. Historians still argue whether pottery workshops in ancient Greece separated roles rigidly, wheel throwers here, painters there, or whether most craftsmen learned the entire process. Some inscriptions suggest a few famous names did both. Others imply strict division. You look around now and see every combination in motion, some shaping, some sketching, some stoke in the kiln. It's less a factory and more a slow-moving organism. Your bowl begins to rise. You press gently from the outside with one hand, the inside with the other, lifting the walls like you're helping it stand. It leans. You adjust. It leans again. You let it. Some pots are meant to wobble. A master passes by, glances down, and gives a slow nod. Not approval, not criticism, just recognition. You're part of the process now. You look over and see someone shaping a wide-mouthed amphora, its neck smooth and symmetric, its belly round and purposeful. The hands that shape it are calloused and calm. That jar will likely hold olive oil in someone's kitchen, maybe shipped out of Piraeus to a distant colony. You wonder how many homes these pots passed through, how many hands touched them before they shattered or were buried or, centuries later, were yanked from the earth by startled archaeologists in khaki hats. A young girl walks by carrying a tray of small arabaloy, tiny perfume jars lined neatly like sleeping ducks. She tips the tray slightly to show you the gleam of fresh slip. A few have etched decorations of simple spirals, tiny dolphins, one with what appears to be a disgruntled goat. She raises her eyebrows in approval of your not quite a bowl, then continues on. You pull your fingers away and let the wheel slow. The clay, now bowl-ish, spins a final lazy circle. It is what it is, and you are oddly proud of it. Your hands are streaked with red. The clay has worked itself under your fingernails, into the creases of your palms. It'll be there for days. It always is. Potters carry their craft like fingerprints, hard to see, harder to scrub off. A small group of apprentices gathers near the wall. One holds a water jug, another holds a cup. They take turns sipping and spitting a little onto the floor, then refilling. It's not thirst. Exactly. It's ritual. Something done to mark the midpoint of the day, like stretching your back or wiping your brow. A way of saying we're halfway through and nothing has exploded yet. A fringe practice you'd never expect. Some potters kept small birds in cages, not for companionship, but as early warning systems. If the birds stopped chirping near the kiln, it meant toxic fumes were escaping. Today's bird is the chicken, still perched in its amphora, still unimpressed. You slide your bowl onto a plank nearby, nudging aside a couple of drying kylikes. There's no applause, just a soft breeze through the open roof slats and the creak of a wheel starting again. It's time for trimming next. But first, there's tea, or the ancient Athenian equivalent, water steeped with herbs, passed around in a communal mug with zero regard for modern hygiene. You take a sip. It tastes like something between mint and chalk. You pretend to enjoy it. Outside, the donkey brays again. Inside, someone mutters about needing more grog. An older potter scratches a design onto a drying plate. Concentric circles, calm and hypnotic. Your mind drifts. You rest your elbows on your knees, clay drying slowly on your skin, and stare at your fingers, not because they hurt, just because you've never seen them work like this before. And then, with a sigh as deep as the wheel's groan, you stand and prepare to do it all again, back at your seat. The wheel has stopped spinning, leaving behind a faint trail of circular grooves in the clay-covered wood. Someone hands you a wire tool stretched between two bits of driftwood. You recognize the shape. It's for cutting your newly formed bowl free from the wheel. Gently, you slide it beneath the base. It makes a soft, wet slicing sound, like pulling a blade through cheese left out too long. Satisfying, if slightly squelchy. Your bowl wobbles as you lift it. You do not correct it. You simply set it onto a nearby board, letting it lean into its own awkwardness. Beside it, other pieces, more symmetrical, more graceful, wait under cloths, drying just slowly enough to avoid cracking. The wheel is now empty, but the space around it is not. A teenage apprentice kneels down with a water jug and sponge, wiping away the slip and splash marks you left behind. She hums as she works. You realize you've been humming too, something rhythmic and wordless that must have snuck into your throat from the motions of the wheel itself. You stand and stretch your arms. Behind you, the sound of another wheel whirring to life adds a soft crescendo to the otherwise drowsy soundtrack of the afternoon. You follow it instinctively and find yourself watching a more experienced potter at work, his wheel turning fast, his hands wet and steady. This is not the beginner's wobble. This is control, the kind that doesn't need to be flaunted. His fingers barely move, but the clay rises smoothly beneath them, narrowing at the top into an elegant neck. You don't speak, you just watch. He's making a crater, a wide bowl used for mixing water with wine. In Athens, this was more than just dinnerware, it was social technology. Mixing water with wine allowed for longer parties, better behavior allegedly, and far fewer embarrassing recitations of Homer. In fact, historians still argue whether craters acted as subtle tools of diplomacy, bringing people together under the guise of moderation, or separating them by who controlled the pour. The potter uses a wooden rib to smooth the side, then pauses to flick excess slip from his fingers. His eyes scan the piece, not for flaws, but for balance. It's an instinct honed over years of shaping things that must hold both weight and meaning. You sit nearby and pick up a trimming tool. It looks like someone bent a bronze hairpin into a loop and called it a day. Yet, in the right hands, it defines the final curve of a pot. In yours, it feels like a spoon pretending to be important. A young girl joins you, balancing a small cup in one hand and a trimming tool in the other. She sets her piece on a turntable, smaller than a wheel, made just for finishing. With steady hands, she begins trimming the base, carving away excess clay to form a neat foot ring. You follow her lead. Your bowl is now firm enough to handle, but still soft like warm wax. You place it on the turntable and begin. The first pass is uneven, the second less so. By the fourth, you've carved something that might pass for intentional. The foot is thick, but proud, like a sandal for a very flat person. In a nearby alcove, pots line the shelves in various states of readiness. Some are nearly dry, their red clay turning pale and hard. Others are slick with freshly applied slip, a dark, inky coating made from diluted clay particles, brushed on before firing. It's what gives Athenian pottery that glossy black sheen after the kiln has done its mysterious work. Someone whispers behind you, just enough to catch careful with the slip. You glance back. A woman with chalky streaks on her arms is stirring a bowl of the stuff, watching you with raised eyebrows. You nod, trying not to look like you were about to do something stupid. You dip a brush made from reeds into a nearby jar and swirl it in the slip. The texture is unlike anything else, silky, cold, thicker than water, thinner than mud. You brush a line across your bowl's outer curve. It drips. You try again. Pottery painting in this era wasn't about realism. It was about symbols, rhythm, gesture. A single curved line could be a vine, a god's arm, or just a pretty swirl. You add 2 more lines, then a row of dots. Are they grapes, stars? You're not sure, but they look patient. A lesser-known tidbit, some of the most elegant designs were probably done by teens. Pottery apprenticeships started young, and hands small enough to manage fine detail often belong to children. It's humbling to realize your lopsided dots may be a tribute to a 13-year-old's masterpiece. Across the room, someone drops a cup. It doesn't break. It just rolls quietly under a shelf and stays there, like it meant to hide. No one reacts. Breakage isn't a crisis. It's just part of the rhythm. You return your bowl to the drying shelf and stare at the other pieces waiting beside it. Each carries a little fingerprint, a nick, a brush stroke that reveals more about the day than any inscription could. Some are signed, though most are not. Names were optional. What mattered was the shape, the weight, the feel in your hands. And now yours waits among them, not perfect, not symmetrical, but whole, for now, outside. The sun tilts further west, and the air grows heavier with kiln smoke and the distant laughter of boys chasing each other with broken handles. A dog barks. The donkey, somehow, has fallen asleep. You sit back down on the stone step, let the last sunlight warm your knees, and listen to the world turn in slow circles, like the wheel, like the day, like the pots still spinning in someone's careful hands. You're not entirely sure what goes wrong. Maybe the clay is a little too wet. Maybe your pressure's off. Maybe the wheel just senses fear. Whatever the cause, the moment you try to coax your next bowl upward, it flops sideways with the theatrical flair of a Greek tragedy chorus fainting at bad news. You stare at it, your misshapen, collapsing cylinder. It slouches to the left, one edge higher than the other, the rim sinking like it's lost the will to be a vessel, Someone behind you clears their throat, not to judge, but to indicate you might want to try again. No one laughs, no one sighs in the world of pottery. Failure isn't a setback, it's practically a phase of production. You scoop the sad lump off the wheel and place it in a slop bucket, half filled with similar defeats. Some are lumpy, others bear the unmistakable fingerprints of those who tried too hard to make something elegant. It's communal, this quiet collection of not quite bowls. A gruff older apprentice slides over a fresh wedge of clay, nods once, and returns to his own work. His hands are caked in dried slip, but his rhythm is easy, almost musical. Press, lift, spin, pause. You mimic him. The next ball of clay is firmer, more agreeable, less prone to dramatic self-destruction. Progress. Historians still argue whether potters signed their names out of pride, regulation, or simple marketing. But the reality is, most ancient pots are anonymous, even the brilliant ones, especially the ones that survived. Somewhere in the Louvre sits a flawless calyx, perfectly balanced and immaculately painted, and the person who made it probably once threw a bowl just like yours into a slop bucket on a warm afternoon like this. You center your new clay more carefully. Your hands remember things now. How to press gently at the start. How to listen for the slight squelch of too much water. How to keep your elbows close to your body so the wobble stays small. This time, the shape begins to rise more evenly. It's a cup, maybe. Not tall, not ambitious. Just a simple, squat, functional thing. A boy about 10 years old stops beside you. His tunic is streaked with red clay, and he's holding a pot so small it might fit in your palm. It's crooked, charming, and entirely his. He beams. You show him your cup. He nods seriously, then holds up his own again for comparison. You both seem satisfied. You begin trimming the rim with a flat reed, smoothing out bumps and soft edges. It feels meditative, like mowing a lawn with a toothbrush. Another potter glances over and points to a small groove running unevenly down the side. You nod, try to fix it, then shrug and leave it. Perfection isn't the point. Continuity is. A low rumble shakes the wooden beams overhead. At first, you think it might be thunder, but no, it's the kiln. Someone's stoking it now, testing its heat for the next round of firings. The walls vibrate slightly, as if the building itself is exhaling. A lesser-known fact: ancient kilns weren't just hot, they were strategic. The three-stage firing process, oxidation, reduction, and reoxidation, gave Greek pottery its famous red and black look. The control of airflow, the timing of dampening the flames with wood shavings, even how long you let the chamber cool afterward, all of it mattered. One wrong draft, and your entire batch could emerge ruined. You glance at your own cup again and wonder what kind of life it would have lived if you'd been born into this. Would it have held oil on a merchant's shelf, or wine at a countryside wedding, or been tossed into a well after someone dropped it mid-toast? Or maybe it never would have made it out of the workshop. Maybe it would have cracked, or slumped, or ended up as grog in someone else's future masterpiece. That thought, oddly, brings comfort. There's a shelf where malformed pots are kept, not for shame, but for study. You walk over to it. One has a twisted handle, another a collapsed rim. Each one tells a story of what not to do, or maybe of what someone tried to do but couldn't. You pick one up and turn it in your hands. It feels just as heavy as a perfect piece, sometimes heavier, nearby. Someone swears softly as their bowl caves in on itself. They scoop it off the wheel with quiet dignity and head back to the wedging table. No tantrums, just the cycle continuing. The air grows heavier. Dust motes float visibly through golden light streaming from a hole in the ceiling. The breeze that flutters through the doorway smells faintly of hot straw and faint charcoal. You wipe your hands on your tunic, then on a cloth, then realize they'll never truly be clean again. The master potter, quiet, unreadable, passes by once more, stops, and picks up your new cup. He turns it once, nods almost imperceptibly, and places it on the drying rack. A win, not a loud one. But loud isn't the goal here. Someone sweeps the floor behind you with a dry broom that barely touches the ground. It's not about cleaning. It's about rhythm, movement, presence. You return to your bench, pick up another lump of clay, and begin again. Because that's what you do in a potter's workshop. On a quiet Athenian afternoon, you fail. You shape. You trim. And when it all goes wrong, you press your thumbs back in and start over. By the time you return from stretching your legs, the light has shifted again. A long golden rectangle stretches across the workshop floor, spotlighting a row of unfired vessels that glisten faintly with moisture. A few have been painted, their surfaces covered in a velvety black slip that darkens as it dries. Others are scratched in delicate lines, revealing red clay beneath. This, you're told, is sgraffito, a technique as quiet as it is clever. You crouch beside a low table where a young artist is etching into a shallow bowl. Her stylus is nothing more than a thin bone, filed to a point so fine it could split a hair. She moves slowly, carefully, dragging the tip through the black slip with almost imperceptible pressure. A figure emerges, two women dancing, arms linked, feet lifted mid-step. They're not mythic or regal, just ordinary, joyful. You don't speak, you just watch. The artist dips her stylus into water and wipes the tip on her tunics. Then, with practiced ease, she draws a border of dots, each placed with identical spacing, like the steady beat of a drum only she hears. When she finishes, she leans back, studies the bowl, then hands it to you. It's stunning, not because it's grand, but because it's gentle, the kind of image someone might look at during a quiet meal, or while filling the bowl with olives for a guest. Art that doesn't demand your attention, but rewards it. You hand it back with both hands, the way you would a precious animal. She nods and sets it on a shelf. Already, the black is drying into a charcoal matte. Slip, this inky black coating made from liquefied clay, isn't paint. It's not applied with pigment, but with chemistry. And that's where the real drama begins. Because once this piece goes into the kiln, what emerges won't be matte and soft anymore. It'll be sharp, shiny, jet black. Or, if something goes wrong, it'll be blotchy, gray, or simply disappointing. Historians still debate whether potters fully understood the chemical reactions they were manipulating, or if the final effect was partially accidental, learned by trial, guarded by superstition. What's clear is that the black figure and red figure techniques weren't just visual styles, they were miracles of timing, air, and flame. You walk to another table where a different technique is underway. A man uses a brush of chewed reed to apply black slip onto a tall amphora. This one's done in the black figure style, shapes painted in silhouette first, with details added later by incision. You watch as he paints a lion, mid-roar, its front paw lifted toward an invisible prey. The form is fluid, confident, finished in less than 3 minutes. He then sets the brush aside, picks up a sharp stylus, and begins scraping in the fur, hundreds of tiny lines that add motion to the lion's mane. You lean closer. There's humor in the face, a little smirk in the teeth. Maybe it's a nod to how lions were more myth than menace in this part of the world. Maybe he just liked cats. You ask, quietly, what he'll add next, he thinks, then says, Heracles. But not fighting, napping. Of course. You chuckle. So does he. Not all pottery was for solemn purposes. Some cups depict gods relieving themselves. Others show athletes cheating, drunks vomiting, or satyrs chasing nothing in particular. People think of ancient art as noble, pristine, but half the stuff left behind was jokes scratched into cups. The ancients had wine and time, and no internet. That combination makes a mischief legacy. Another pot nearby is nearly dry, its glossy surface painted in the red figure style, opposite from black figure. Here, the figures are left as bare clay, while the background is painted black. It allows for greater detail, softer lines, more room for anatomy, clothing folds, and awkward hands. You study one such hand now. It looks like it's holding something confusing, possibly a lyre, possibly a fish, possibly both. A fringe tidbit certain painters added inscriptions next to their characters, sometimes names, sometimes compliments. One pot simply reads, Kalos, or handsome, next to a youth's face. Was it an endorsement? A tease. A passive-aggressive note from the painter scholars still argue. You just enjoy the mystery. Across the room, an apprentice drops her brush and lets out a groan. Her pot has smudged. The slip ran, bleeding into the border. She doesn't cry. She just stares at it like it told her a rude secret. Then, with practiced calm, she wipes it clean with a wet rag and starts again. This is the heart of decoration, not perfection, but repetition. The hand memorizes lines. The eye adjusts expectations. The mistake becomes just one more layer beneath the next try. You ask if you can try a sgraffito line yourself. They give you a test bowl, a rough piece for practice. You scratch a line. It's too deep. You try another. It veers. But the third's smooth, even. It's a vine, or it might be a snake. It doesn't matter. You draw a spiral beside it, then a dot, then, on impulse, a small wave. You pause, stylus raised, heart calm. No one critiques it, no one needs to. Because now it's not just clay anymore. It's memory of your hands, your breath, your quiet afternoon in a workshop where lions sleep, gods nap, and even mistakes become part of the art. Outside the workshop, the light has softened to that honey-colored glow that only appears when the sun has decided not to hurry. You step through the low doorway and into the courtyard, where pots rest on planks in careful rows, drying beneath linen cloths weighed down with pebbles. A few have already been etched and painted, some awaiting final inspection, others silently asking, should I get a goat or a satyr? You wander toward a shaded alcove where a group of painters sit cross-legged around a small table. On it rests a slab of soft clay etched with rough sketches, a reclining Dionysus sipping from a kylix. A trio of dancers mid-spin, and a youth strumming what may or may not be a very confused-looking lyre. The conversation drifts between topics, meandering as slowly as the afternoon. One artist argues that Dionysus is always a good choice. Wine, revelry, goats, what's not to love? Another insists that scenes of everyday life sell better. Farmers, wrestlers, people carrying jugs. Nobody's bringing a god to dinner, he says, daubing a dot onto his panel. A third painter leans back and mutters, unless they're paying. The debate continues, gentle and unhurried. You sit beside them and listen. The subject shifts to more practical matters. Who's out of slip? Whether the kiln has cooled, and whether it's too late to steal a fig from the orchard without getting yelled at. It's easy to forget, surrounded by these fragments of future museum treasures, that most of these pots were made for grocery runs, wine mixers, or wedding gifts, art, yes, but also packaging. Think Amazon Prime, but with grapevine motifs and occasional naked satyrs. Historians still argue whether certain motifs carried coded messages. Was a depiction of Heracles lounging with a cup meant to signal affluence, or just good humor? Did women at home prefer images of daily chores because they saw themselves, or because it made the pot feel familiar? Interpretation is speculation, but speculation was always part of the game. You're handed a fresh panel of leather-hard clay, not for throwing, not for shaping, but for sketching. No tools, just a stick. Someone gestures, draw something, you hesitate, then begin. A spiral, a sun, a wobbly fish, a bird that looks more like a feathered gourd. No one stops you. A boy peers over your shoulder, squints, and says, "Nice dolphin." You don't correct him as you work. A painted vase beside you catches your eye. It shows a woman holding a basket, her head tilted in a moment of imagined conversation. There's something deeply ordinary about her, not divine, not heroic, just thoughtful. She might be wondering if the bread is done. You point at the image and ask if it's based on someone real. A painter shrugs. Maybe, he says, or maybe she's just someone we all recognize. You sit with that for a while. The idea that pots carry not just images, but echoes of people. That somewhere, someone pressed a brush to wet slip and thought of their mother, or their neighbor, or someone they glimpsed once on a ferry crossing to Salamis. A fringe detail. Some scholars believe the imagery on Athenian pottery subtly evolved in response to political changes. Scenes of celebration during periods of military expansion. Domestic calm when democracy trembled says it's not propaganda. Exactly. It's pottery as cultural barometer, as if the kiln records more than heat. The conversation at the table slows. One painter nods off mid-sentence. Another begins cleaning brushes with a rag so stained it might as well be a fresco. You add a final swirl to your panel and set the stick down. From the corner of your eye, you see a pot being carried toward the kiln, still wet with slip, still fragile. Two apprentices hold it between them like a sleeping animal. The kiln's mouth yawns open. A dark dome of smoky brick and ember. It's not firing time yet, but the anticipation hangs in the air. You walk back toward the shelf of drying vessels. Your bowl is still there, drying slowly, safe for now. It may make it to the kiln. It may not. Either way, it has existed, formed from earth, touched by your hands, considered by others. One of the painters joins you, carrying a jar shaped like a pumpkin and painted with a wild horse mid-gallop. Too dramatic, he asks. You tilt your head. Depends if the horse wins. He snorts, then sets it on the shelf beside yours. You both step back and stare for a moment at your pieces, at the rows, at the fading sunlight on clay. No one speaks, because sometimes the question isn't what to paint, but why. And sometimes the answer is just because the afternoon was long and the workshop was quiet and the clay was ready to listen. The kiln looms like a sleeping beast at the edge of the courtyard, its rounded brick form streaked black with years of smoke. You approach slowly, the air warmer near its walls, as if it remembers every fire ever lit inside. Beside it sits a man known only as the Fire Master, barefoot, soot-streaked, and currently fast asleep on a pile of cracked roof tiles. A stick dangles loosely from his hand, still pointing vaguely toward the kiln's air vent, like some lazy wizard mid-incantation. You stop short of the arched opening. Inside, it's black, utterly so. You peer in. Nothing stirs. The hearth has gone cold after its last firing, though a few stray embers still glow at the base, pulsing faintly like distant stars. It's not dangerous yet. It's waiting. A stack of wood lies neatly to one side, sorted by thickness. Kindling, olive wood, bundled reeds. You touch one of the bricks. Warm, not hot. But the memory of heat lingers, baked into every surface. A shelf of cracked pottery leans against the outer wall, warped jars, half-burst bowls, things that didn't quite survive the kiln's judgment. Their surfaces are glassy and misshapen, as if they melted under pressure and decided to become abstract art. A quiet voice beside you says, "This one breathed wrong." You glance over. An apprentice points at a fractured kylix. Its glaze has bubbled along the rim. Too much oxygen. Maybe, or not enough. She shrugs. The kiln is precise in its moods, but it's not always predictable. Historians still argue whether ancient fire masters followed fixed temperature schedules or simply read the flames like omens. The truth likely lies somewhere in the middle, part science, part superstition, all experience. You look back at the kiln and try to imagine it at full blaze. The heat, the glow, the utter focus it demands. This three-chambered updraft kiln, domed, stoked from the side, was a marvel of Athenian design. It allowed potters to control airflow through the flues, shift the atmosphere inside, and achieve the famed red and black finishes that made their ceramics famous far beyond Greece. The process begins with oxidation, air flowing freely, turning the vessels bright red as the iron in the clay oxidizes. Then comes reduction. The vents are closed, the flames dampened, smoke fills the chamber, and the iron turns black. Finally, reoxidation. Air is reintroduced, and everything not protected by slip turns red again. It sounds technical, and it is, but here, it's also felt in bones. The firemaster stirs, blinks, sits up slowly. He doesn't look at you, just stands, dusts off his tunic, and walks over to a stack of pots under a linen sheet. These have dried long enough. They're ready. He selects one, balancing it in both hands. It's tall, slender, with a flared lip and twin handles. Perfect symmetry. He passes it to an apprentice, who cradles it like a sleeping child, and just like that, loading begins. You help, carefully lifting your own small bowl. Its surface is firm now, chalky. your fingerprints still faintly visible in the base. You carry it toward the kiln, where others are gently stacking vessels on low ceramic stilts. Everything must fit, must balance, must allow air to flow between pieces. It's like playing chess with fragile ghosts. You slide your bowl into place. No ceremony, just a nod from the firemaster. Then another layer begins. More pots, more stilts, then bricks to close the mouth. The kiln is sealed like a secret. A soft breeze passes through the courtyard. The apprentices sit in a circle again, wiping their arms, sipping from a jug of tepid water. One sings a fragment of a song about a cat who tricked a fisherman. No one knows all the words. No one needs to. A lesser known tidbit: some potters left small offerings inside the kiln before firing. Bits of bread, sprigs of thyme, tiny carved figures, gifts to whatever spirit guarded the flame. You glance toward the firemaster. He kneels briefly near the vents, places something unseen inside, then rises without comment. The sun dips lower, shadows stretch long. The kiln is lit. It begins slowly, just a flicker, then a whisper of flame licking from the stoking hole. The firemaster feeds it gently, methodically, like an old friend. The air changes. It smells sharper now, smoky and dry. The walls of the kiln begin to hum faintly as the heat seeps back into their bones. You sit nearby, cross-legged in the dust, watching the dance begin. Flame, breath, timing, patience. Nothing flashy, nothing rushed, just the slow coaxing of alchemy. Someone offers you a date, sticky with honey and grit. You eat it without thinking. Someone else passes a fig, sliced and warm. Another jokes that if your bowl explodes, you owe him lunch. You agree. You look toward the kiln again, now glowing deeper, its mouth alive with orange. Inside, your bowl sits unseen, enduring its trial by fire, and there's nothing more to do. So you lean back, rest your head against a cool stone, and let the warmth of the kiln brush your face. It's quiet now, just fire and breath and time, and one very still donkey in the far corner, unimpressed as ever. The kiln has been burning steadily for hours now, its bricks glowing at the seams like a lantern made from the earth itself. You wake from a brief nap, unsure how long you were out, and feel the difference in the air. It's drier, sharper, tinged with a mineral edge that clings to your nostrils. Somewhere, something inside the fire is changing. You sit up, stretching your arms slowly. A few other potters are gathered around the firemaster, who crouches near a vent stone, watching the flames through a narrow gap. He says nothing, just breathes with the kiln, as if waiting for it to exhale something sacred. This is the moment the entire process hinges on, when fire and air must be manipulated with the kind of precision that defies explanation. The firemaster rises, wipes his brow with a soot-stained sleeve, and gives a short grunt. It's the only command needed. Apprentices spring into motion, not frantic, but alert. Some begin reducing airflow, plugging vents with broken tiles and rags. Others dampen bundles of olive wood, preparing for the reduction phase. A girl with streaks of slip on her knees dashes off to wet a cloth, while another ladles a dark slurry of crushed straw and ash into the stoking hole. You're handed a long reed wrapped in linen. Your job is simple: fan the vents, then seal them on cue. You crouch beside the kiln, heart oddly calm. The air gets thicker, The flames change color, dimming from orange to something closer to a deep coppery red. Smoke billows gently out in puffs that seem to whisper. You do as you're told. Fan. Pause. Seal. The firemaster walks a slow circle around the kiln, tapping bricks with a stick, listening to their pitch. He mutters something about just right and disappears behind the rear flue. This part of the process, known as reduction, deprives the interior of oxygen. It forces the iron in the slip-coated pots to turn black, while the rest of the clay, sheltered beneath that slip, awaits reoxidation to return to its red color. Sounds like chemistry class it is, only here, the classroom might melt your shoes if you're not careful. Historians still debate whether ancient potters truly grasped the molecular reactions involved or just learned through generations of experimentation. Did they understand oxidation states? Or just know that closing the flue at this precise hour of the day made the black deeper, the red richer either way? It worked. You glance at the firemaster again. His face glows in the kiln light, expression unreadable. He gives a nod. The vents are reopened as a reoxidation begins. The flames surge brighter. Air rushes in. The smoke thins from inside. A faint pop echoes, followed by a muffled crack. Someone winces. A pot has failed. Maybe yours, maybe not. You don't feel panic, just acceptance. Some vessels make it, some don't. Even the best potters lose pieces to the kiln. That's why there's always another batch waiting. A lesser-known tidbit, some workshops use the failed pots in house construction. Crushed shards filled walls, paved courtyards, even reinforced rooftops in Athens. It's possible you've walked on someone's collapsed amphora without ever knowing it. As the final phase continues, the courtyard quiets again. The stoking slows. The fire settles into a low, steady hum. The pots inside begin to cool, slowly and carefully. A too quick drop in temperature can cause them to crack from thermal shock, so everyone waits, watches, listens. You walk back toward the work tables. A few apprentices are sketching on scraps of clay. One draws a swan with too many legs. Another scribbles what looks like a goat eating grapes, labeled with a name that might be a private joke. You sit and pick up a fragment of broken pottery. It's thin, sharp, half of a painted figure. You trace the line of what used to be a face, maybe a warrior, maybe a merchant. Just one eye remains. It stares calmly upward, untouched by fire. A breeze lifts dust from the courtyard, carrying it toward the olive trees. The donkey shifts in its sleep. The firemaster snores against a stack of wood, and you, hands stained with clay, forehead glistening, lean back and close your eyes again. The pots will rest overnight. The kiln, still hot but fading, continues to breathe in long, slow sighs, and somewhere in the dark, your bowl waits, intact or broken, beautiful or flawed. Either way, finished. The morning arrives without ceremony. No rooster call, no horn, no hymn to Helios. Just the slow lifting of light over the workshop's clay-streaked walls, and the quiet yawns of apprentices rising one by one from straw mats and shaded corners. You're among them, arms stiff, mouth dry, your tunic still smelling faintly of kiln smoke. You stretch and walk toward the kiln before anyone else, not out of impatience, just curiosity, softened by a quiet kind of hope. The kiln is still sealed, but the heat has faded to something tolerable. A potter places his palm flat against the brick. He doesn't flinch. That's a good sign. The fire master appears with the slow precision of someone who slept deeply but never forgets his job. He says nothing, just begins removing bricks from the mouth of the kiln, one by one, with every brick lifted. The scent of ash and warm earth escapes like a sigh from a long-held breath. Everyone watches. The interior is dark at first. Soot still clings to the dome, and only the barest hint of pottery glints in the shadows. Then, the morning light slides in, and there they are, rows of pots, unmoving, each one transformed. The slip has turned glassy and black, deep as ink. The exposed clay between designs has returned to red, richer now, almost burnished. Some surfaces are flawless, others show faint bubbling, tiny pinholes, a streak of gray where the fire danced too long. Each flaw tells a story. You lean in, searching. Your bowl, your humble, misshapen, utterly earnest bowl, is still there, not cracked, not collapsed. Its surface gleams like oil. The small spiral you scratched along the rim is sharper now, more confident than you remember. You smile. There's no applause, just a nod from the fire master. That means it survived. All around you, pots are being lifted carefully, inspected, tapped with a fingernail to hear their tone. A clean, sharp ring means a good firing. A dull thunk means something didn't set properly. Not a failure, just another version of success. Historians still argue whether the average Athenian cared about the pot's artwork or just wanted something that didn't leak. But based on the craftsmanship you see now, someone certainly cared. Someone shaped that foot ring with intention. Someone painted that running satyr with flair. Someone trimmed the rim so it would pour without dripping. You help carry pots from the kiln to the cooling shelves. Some are amphorae, tall and stately. Others are tiny oil flasks, araballoi, each painted with a scene no bigger than your thumbnail. One shows a boy chasing a goose. Another, two women laughing beneath a tree. Not myths, just moments. One apprentice wraps a jug in linen and places it in a crate bound for Corinth. Another carefully stacks bowls meant for a nearby tavern. A third sets aside a flawed vessel, then grinds it underfoot, sweeping the shards into a basket. No ceremony, just space for new beginnings. You set your bowl beside others on a display shelf near the workshop's front wall. It sits crooked, still a bit proud. No one would call it exceptional. But it's there. It was made. It exists. A lesser-known tidbit, some potters intentionally embedded minor flaws, slight warps, tiny asymmetries, as a kind of personal fingerprint, not because they didn't know better, but because perfection was the domain of gods. Mortals left room for error. The rest of the morning passes in quiet industry. The courtyard hums with brushing, sorting, wrapping. A girl recites a list of items ready for delivery. Someone chases a dog out of the storeroom. The chicken, ever unimpressed, lays an egg in the empty slip bucket. You help clean the kiln. It's not glamorous, just scraping soot, wiping ash, resetting bricks for the next round. But it feels good, useful, grounded, nearby. A potter paints the final lines onto a kylix that will leave tomorrow. The inscription reads, "Drink and remember." No name, just a wish. You pause beside your bowl again. A boy asks if he can have it. You're surprised. You nod. He beams, and just like that, it's his. You don't feel loss, you feel continuity. It'll hold olives, probably, or figs, or maybe little stones. It doesn't matter, because what matters isn't that you made something perfect, it's that you made something at all. And now, as the sun rises higher and laughter drifts in from the outer street, you realize the workshop doesn't rest. Not truly. It shifts, turns, begins again, just like the wheel. Later that afternoon, with the kiln cooling and the shelves freshly stocked, you find yourself seated at a side table cluttered with tools, not the grand brush and slip instruments of the painters, nor the heavy spades of the clay collectors. No, these are the quiet tools, the ones that rarely get their moment in stories. And yet, they do most of the shaping. Laid out before you are simple objects, a few looped wires, each with a wooden handle worn smooth from years of palms, a flat paddle the size of a hand, fine styluses made from bone and bronze, and brushes fashioned from reed stems and stiff goat hairs bound in twine. None of them look particularly impressive. Most wouldn't even draw a second glance. But here, they're prized. You pick up a trimming loop. It fits your hand so well. You wonder if it's been passed down from apprentice to apprentice, slowly adopting the shape of each grip like a river stone absorbing the story of every current. You press it against a half-dry bowl, shaving off a thin ribbon of clay. It curls away, falls to the floor with a sigh. You do it again and again. Nearby, a girl polishes a nearly dry cup using a piece of smooth leather. She rubs it in circles, burnishing the surface until it gleams like river-wet stone. You watch her for a moment, then try it yourself. The clay responds, not dramatically, but with a subtle sheen that catches the light just right. It feels a bit like coaxing a compliment from a quiet friend. Some tools are even stranger. A strip of braided horsehair for scoring handles, a hollow reed that whistles faintly when blown across the lip of a drying pot, used to test for hidden cracks, a stylus so sharp it could etch your name into history, or at least into the bottom of a plate. Historians still debate whether specific tools were standardized or improvised. Did every potter's shop buy from the same smith, or did they carve their own paddles from orchard prunings and sharpen fish bones for delicate work? The archaeological evidence is mixed. Some tools appear widely, others only in certain cities. But what's clear is that each piece of pottery bore the invisible signature of the tools that made it. You're handed a cup missing one handle, not broken, just never finished. Your job is to attach a new one. You roll out a coil of clay, flatten it slightly, bend it into an arc, but before you join it to the cup, you scratch both surfaces, then add a bit of slurry, the ancient equivalent of glue, then press, hold, count slowly, release. The handle stays, for now. It's a small act, but it means the cup will pour, will be held, will live longer. There's a quiet satisfaction in this work. You look down at your clay-slicked fingers, your stained tunic, and the row of simple tools now flecked with dust and water. None are glamorous, none boast precision engineering, but they make things, over and over, day after day. A lesser-known tidbit archaeologists have discovered styluses bearing personal marks, tiny carvings of animals, or initials, or gods, like a craftsman saying, "This one's mine," even if no one ever sees it. You look at your trimming loop. It has no mark, but you wonder what story it would tell if it did. You wander to the shelf where finished pots are cooling. You tap one gently. It sings. Another one thunks. Flawed. You place a small chip of clay under its base to level it. A trick someone showed you that morning. The pot wobbles less now. Not perfect, but better. The sun dips lower, casting long streaks across the floorboards. The shadows of brushes and paddles stretch like dancers preparing for sleep. One of the apprentices begins sweeping the work table with a reed broom, not for cleanliness, just to reset. Another stacks styluses by length, lines them up like soldiers awaiting orders. A boy oils the handles of a few trimming loops, humming softly. You help gather the bone tools. Each one is wrapped in a scrap of cloth and returned to a wooden drawer near the back of the workshop. The drawer creaks. Inside, it smells of beeswax and old clay. History. Before you close it, you find one last tool, small, curved, unlike the others. You turn it over in your palm. No one knows what it does, or did. Some tools are like that. Their purpose was obvious once. Now they're mysteries, but they still feel like they matter. You return it to its place, gently, and step back into the light. The tools, quiet again, wait for tomorrow. The workshop has quieted to its softest hum, the way a village does after supper, when stomachs are full, tasks are mostly done, and people begin speaking just a little slower. You sit on a low stool, sipping water from a chipped clay cup that was likely made by someone long gone. The lip is uneven, but it doesn't spill. That's all anyone really wants from a cup. A potter nearby is wrapping finished wares for travel. She works without speaking, hands moving with practiced care. She places each vessel in a straw-lined crate, fitting them like puzzle pieces between tufts of wool and folded linen. These pots are headed for Corinth, maybe Rhodes. Some might go further, across the Aegean, into Etruscan markets where Greek ceramics are coveted like fine sculpture. You crouch beside her and offer to help. She hands you a jug, small, bulbous, delicate. The painted figure on the side shows a woman holding a long-necked bird. You wonder where she'll end up. On a merchant's shelf, in someone's kitchen, buried in a grave, only to be rediscovered 1,000 years later. That's the strange life of Greek pottery, made to be used, yet made so well that it outlives its makers. Amphorae once filled with oil are now museum showpieces. Wine cups that passed from hand to hand at a symposium now sit under glass, silently judging tourists for mispronouncing Crowder. Historians still argue whether this durability was intentional or incidental. Were these vessels designed to endure, or did they just happen to resist time better than cloth, wood, and memory either way? They became storytellers, unearthed by accident, misinterpreted, lovingly dusted, catalogued, displayed, and always, underneath the centuries, still just clay. You ask where this shipment is headed. To the docks by morning, someone says. Then Piraeus, then wherever the boat goes. You help carry a crate to the courtyard, where it's stacked beside others, marked with small symbols, lines, waves, little fish that let the traders know what's inside and where it belongs. No fancy shipping labels here, just clay, straw, and chalk. A donkey stands tethered nearby, watching you with the same deeply unimpressed expression it wore yesterday. A cart waits. its wheels creaking even when still. You sit beside it for a moment, letting your legs dangle. The ground below is littered with tiny shards, flakes of trimmings, broken handles, failed attempts. You run your fingers through them. They tinkle like coins. A lesser known detail, some shards were recycled into entirely different trades, ground down and added to plaster, embedded into mosaic floors, used to sharpen blades. Pottery was more than vessel. It was resource. You glance back into the workshop. It's dim now, golden. A painter finishes a last line on a wine cup, two curled leaves beside a reclining satyr. She sets it on a shelf and stretches her arms. The cup will dry overnight. If it survives, it ships. If it cracks, it becomes grog. Nothing is wasted. You re-enter the workshop and sit on a stool near the door. A breeze rolls in, stirring dust across the floor in slow spirals. Someone sweeps it away. Someone else sneezes. The rhythm continues. A young apprentice brings you a bowl. Not your own, it's theirs. Uneven. A little too thin near the rim. Painted with something that might be a turtle or an onion. They hold it out with pride. You accept it like a gift, because it is. You ask if they want to trade. They nod. You take them outside and retrieve your own bowl from the crate, not the one meant for export, but the crooked one you made earlier. The first to survive the kiln. You offer it, they grin. The trade is complete. No signatures, no contracts, just clay exchanged between two hands. You both sit on the step, watching the sun droop lower. The donkey shifts, the cart creaks. The crates sit quietly in the growing shadows, waiting for their slow journey across land and sea. And so the pots travel quietly, constantly, humbly, carried on backs, boats, heads, across valleys and waves, into homes, markets, temples, and, eventually, into soil again. You lean back and close your eyes. Tomorrow will bring another batch of clay, another wheel spin, another lopsided bowl or perfect amphora. But for now, all is still, and stillness, here, is sacred. The light is fading now, long and amber, casting a mellow hush over the potter's quarter. You walk slowly through the workshop, where the day's labor lingers in the scent of slip, the curl of drying clay, and the soft prints of bare feet scattered across the dusty floor. Every shelf is full, and every pot is still. The noise of shaping, scratching, firing, all that is past. What remains is what always remains: objects, and the silence they leave behind. In one corner, an older potter is gently oiling a large amphora, not with the fine polish of someone finishing a showpiece, but with the quiet routine of someone preparing a companion for the road. He dips a cloth in a shallow bowl of olive oil, rubs it slowly across the vessel's surface, buffing it to a dull sheen. This amphora isn't headed for a temple, it's for a grain merchant. No myth, no glory, just grain. He doesn't look up as you approach, but he does push a smaller jug your way, plain, practical, unpainted. Try, he says. You take the cloth, dip it, and mimic the circular motion. The clay drinks the oil instantly. Your hands remember the rhythm of earlier, the wheel, the trimming, the smoothing, and now apply it to this final act of finishing. Gentle, even, unhurried. The workshop around you has shifted from labor to ritual. Brushes are washed, tools are laid out on the bench to dry. A potter recoils a loop of wire, her fingers moving automatically. Someone shakes clay from their sandals and sets them by the door. No one speaks unless they must, not because they're tired, though they are, but because the work has settled into the air. You step outside and breathe. The sky is streaked with violet now, and the wind has cooled that's down the street. Someone is roasting chickpeas. The scent wafts gently across the yard, curling through the olive trees and past the ever-patient donkey, who is now chewing a discarded handle as if it might surprise him. A boy sets a new batch of wet clay out beneath the awning, wrapped in linen to rest overnight. You nod to him, he nods back. Tomorrow, that clay will be bowls, or not. But tonight, it's enough that it waits. Historians still debate how much ancient potters valued the artistry of their work. Some point to the signatures of vase painters, Exechius, Euphronios, as proof of pride and individual recognition. Others believe the majority labored anonymously, content to contribute to a collective rhythm that transcended fame. Perhaps both are true. Perhaps the quietest hands left the deepest legacy. You sit by the cooling kiln, which now emits no heat, only memory. The bricks have darkened again. The firemaster is gone, off to sleep, or maybe to drink, his tools left leaning like tired soldiers beside the flue. On a nearby shelf lies a rejected pot, not broken, just unwanted. Its neck is too narrow, its base too broad. You pick it up. It's cold, heavy, imperfect. You like it immediately. You carry it to the basin and fill it with water. It holds. You drink. It tastes of dust and something older. You set it beside you and keep your hand on its rim, like a stone to remind you you're still grounded. A lesser-known tradition, potters sometimes scratched messages into the bottoms of their works, not for the buyer, who'd never see it, but for themselves. Names, prayers, jokes. One surviving cup bears this note in scratched Greek: whoever steals this, may their wine turn sour. You look at the base of the jug you're holding. No message, just a single thumbprint. That's enough. Behind you. The sun finally drops behind the Acropolis. The last edge of light stretches across the stones like a brushstroke made by the gods themselves. The street quiets. A boy whistles. The day ends, and inside, in a workshop filled with dust and waiting and slowly cooling shelves, 100 pots rest. Some will leave, some will break, some will disappear, but all were made, and in that, there is peace. The sweep of dusk is complete now, and night has folded gently over the potter's quarter. You sit beneath a sloped roof near the edge of the courtyard, legs stretched out, back against a clay-stained wall that still radiates the day's warmth. The smell of earth, ash, and olive oil clings to the air like an old shawl, familiar, comforting, and just a little scratchy. Inside, someone lights an oil lamp. Its flicker casts elongated shadows over a row of finished kylikes. The flames catch on the glossy black slip, making the painted figures, drunks, satyrs, sleepy gods, seem to move for just a moment before settling back into stillness. No one's working now, not really. A few linger, wiping their hands, tying bundles of reeds, inspecting pots not because they must, but because it's hard to stop touching things made by hand. It's the same instinct that keeps you brushing your fingers over that drying amphora's curve, or gently thumbing the edge of a bowl like you're reassuring it that it did just fine. Someone nearby plays a flute, not a full tune, just fragments, like a song half remembered. It blends with the whisper of wind in the courtyard. the gentle clack of tools being returned to their boxes, the distant shuffle of sandaled feet returning home. The donkey sighs, almost theatrically, and shifts its weight. Everything is slower now, intentional, ready for sleep. You find yourself sweeping, not because anyone asked, but because there's satisfaction in it. A soft, bristled broom, the rhythmic scrape across stone, the little trails of red dust that curl into gentle piles. It's not a chore here, it's part of closing the day. Historians still argue whether workshops like this functioned like modern studios or closer to family homes. Some even suggest certain households were multi-generational pottery operations, with grandparents shaping lids, parents trimming bases, children mixing slip in wide-mouthed jars they'd one day paint themselves. You look around and feel that truth in every corner. Work and life are folded into one here, not separate, not segmented, just steady. You pass the shelves one last time. The painted scenes feel softer now in the lamplight. One cup shows a sleeping Heracles beneath a fig tree, his lion skin draped like a blanket. Another depicts a girl pouring water into a wide-mouthed crater while a small dog barks at her foot. There are no gods in these moments, only people, people who lived and laughed and painted and dropped things. A lesser-known tidbit archaeologists have found graffiti scratched into the walls of potters' workshops. Messages like, "I finished this with one eye open," or "Don't touch unless you're clean." Even centuries later, the tone feels familiar, tired, wry, human. You smile and set your broom aside. A girl walks past with a folded cloth and offers you a piece of dried fig. You accept it, sweet, slightly grainy, perfect. She doesn't say anything. She doesn't need to. You sit again, this time beside the stone basin where you once tested a flawed jug. The jug is still there. Someone's filled it with herbs, mint, thyme, and something sharp like bay. A quiet offering. You breathe it in. The scent grounds you. Above, the sky has turned a cool velvet. Stars blink into being. First one, then a dozen, then hundreds. No constellations here, just pinpricks of light above a city that never quite stops murmuring. Behind you, the wheel stands still, or the clay rests, the fire sleeps, and as your eyes grow heavier, you let the day go, not with a grand send-off, not with a final flourish, just with the soft brushing of clay dust from your palms, in the quiet knowledge that in a little corner of ancient Athens, you spent a slow, steady afternoon helping Earth become memory. And now, with everything quiet, with the pots cooling and the fire long faded, you breathe out. The day has pressed its gentle weight into your limbs. Your shoulders ache in that soft, earned way. Your fingers remember the curve of the bowl, the wobble of the wheel, the steady, damp give of the clay beneath your palms. Everything you touched today was slow to respond, and you matched its pace. That was the whole point. The night deepens around you, tender and complete, somewhere nearby. A door creaks closed. A pot clinks softly on a shelf. The last breath of kiln smoke curls upward into the stars, and even the wind holds its hush for a while longer. You sit still, back warmed by old bricks, face cooled by the breeze. There is no need to speak, or move, or wonder what happens next. The work has been done. The workshop rests, and so do you. Tomorrow will come with more clay, more shaping, more failures, and more small victories. But that's not your concern now. Your bowl has dried. The wheel has stopped. Let your breathing slow. Let your jaw unclench. Let your thoughts slip, like tools being returned to a shelf. The stars keep watch. The donkey sleeps. The world turns. And you, just as you are, can drift slowly and easily into stillness, into sleep.